OS vendors and derivatives, we talked about this a little bit already. The strength of an operating system or any project, diversity drives strength. Brian Cantrell, he and I don't agree on everything, but he is a wonderful speaker and we agree on a lot. And one of the things we do agree on is forking is not bad, right? Especially if it's managed in a way that the forks are friendly, essentially. Diversity allows you to explore allows different organizations to solve their needs, right? Different companies and so forth, but yet still be part of the greater community, and allows the common core to pick and choose those things that are shared values. And a shared value is actually very important to the community. I don't have that on the slide anymore, but that's one of the good things about illumos. Actually, I do have something about that. So of course, commercial distributions and distributors make for good contributions, good contributors. Nexento was the first commercial contributor to illumos. Now we see a lot of stuff happening from Joyent. I think you're going to see some other stuff happening. I am, of course, going to be involved with what I hope will become a commercial distributor for illumos, and I'm going to be doing a lot of work around illumos as part of my new venture. So, use these commercial venues, and having more of them means that you have more opportunity to collect money, right? You also need free alternatives, of course. So Open Indiana, there used to be this thing called Nexento Core Platform and so forth. This lets you spread everywhere, right? So getting as much spread is good too. One of the things that you have to be prepared for, and we've seen this with illumos, is we announced a new open source operating system, Project Core, and a lot of people wanted to build things, and we had some problems with. I say we. There were distributions that were, I'll call them abortive efforts, doomed efforts, because actually it seems that one of the things is, and I fell into this trap as a kind of recent student as well, the idea that, oh, operating system project, I want to go do my own operating system distribution. Back in the 90s, I remember there was a bajillion Linux distributions. It seems like every week there was a new Linux distribution cropping up. Why? Because everybody says, oh, I want to do a distribution too. I can do this. It's cool, right? It turns out building a distribution and building a successful distribution is really, really hard. It's a lot of work. And in fact, desktop distributions are the worst. My former employers discovered this firsthand, and that's why there's no more desktop distribution of Nexento. Of Nexento OS. So you have to be prepared for these road bumps, right? And not be disheartened by them. And maybe you also, one of the other things we found was you get differences of opinion, and the differences of opinion around around distributions can be very, very challenging. So I would say that our biggest arguments in the illumos community have come as a result of differences that really derive out of differences of what happens in a distribution. For some reason, packaging seems to be one of the things that people are particularly religious about, but it extends beyond just packaging. So I can point to Shillix as one of these things that was really problematic for us. There was another one called, well, they were trying to call it Secure Illumos, and I think I squashed that name, and then the distro died for other reasons. Mostly that it's really hard to do, and they didn't have enough energy behind it. So these are some of the folks that are distributing or down. Basically, you can consider these downstreams. There's a big question mark in there. Big question mark is there's others that I don't know about, that I think I know about, but they haven't told me and they're not engaged in the community. And then there's some that I know that are coming. So there's more coming. Of course, an open source operating system project, especially kernel, doesn't live on its own. And I've seen this situation with other operating systems where they create this tension. It becomes competitive and argumentative. The situation between the OpenBSD and the NetBSD folks is a good example, right? They create a lot of toxicity. So instead, what I like to do is look at look at the ecosystem, the open source ecosystem, and how can we, understanding that we all have different goals, but how can we mutually collaborate around those things that make sense to collaborate on? And you'll see, you may see some surprising logos there, right? Like the Apple logo or the Linux or even the Open Solaris logo, right? So the Open Solaris project's still kind of alive today, even though it's not really. There's pieces that of Userland's code and X-Windows code that's still maintained by that community openly, even though the kernel is not. And so there's interactions that happen there, right? FreeBSD, we have a very much of a two-way street with FreeBSD. I lifted code from them, and they took some and then modified it, enhanced it. Actually wrote a localdef utility. They took that code back, a lot of that code back. Apple, same idea. I looked at the Darwin code, and Apple is actually is one of the first, apart from Sun, commercial integrators of dtrace, right? Where does the dtrace core live? In illumos. By the way, does everybody know that ZFS and dtrace come out of basically Solaris, hence illumos, right? So, and we're actually going to have there's a few talks around these topics here at Scale. Going back to the community event for a minute, this is really cool. We have 4 talks, it's 4, right? That are illumos oriented, plus representation on the panel, which, holy smokes, we're only, we've been around only 17 months. This is amazing, right? So even the Linux folks who, sometimes we have licensing debates, but there's good stuff that comes out of the FSF and the GNU folks, and we make use of it, right? So there's interactions kind of here throughout. I'm not going to talk to each one of these, but I can point to specific examples for each one of these. So community interactions are really important. And this, one of the bottom logos there was the ZFS logo. I want to talk specifically about this. Anybody feel that ZFS is particularly near and dear to their heart in this audience? There's a couple, okay. For a lot of us, it's very near and dear to our hearts. It was very near and dear to the hearts of my previous employer, certainly. It turns out that ZFS as a technology has been adopted by a lot of different interested parties outside of illumos and outside of Solaris as well. So there's commercial integrations at Delphix and Joyens and Nexenta. Those are the illumos-based ones. Then there's the one from Oracle, of course. There's a couple of Linux ports. I think I'm losing track of all the Linux ones. It's integrated into FreeBSD. At one point it was in Mac OS. The Mac OS project died inside Apple, but the guy who's the chief guy behind that has gone and created a separate commercial company around a version of ZFS for Mac OS. This is a separate commercial product. So the challenge here is, how do we keep this community cohesive? So there's a community that extends beyond illumos, right? That's very interested in this core technology. So we created the CFS working group, right? We're interested in solving some problems around making sure that we have file system compatibility, but while we still allow for interesting new features to be developed that might be shared or might not be shared, so forth, right? So what we did was created this group, and again, not everybody in here wanted to expose themselves to the fact, or wanted to expose the fact that they were using ZFS in their commercial products and so forth. So we had to be private, but if we were private, then we needed to, then it sort of looked like a cabal. And this was a real problem, and there was been a lot of fun around this. And this is an ongoing challenge, right? Is how do we get the community to understand that there is basically this effectively a working group, sort of like an IETF working group or an IEEE working group, right? Where it's kind of by invite only, but it's fairly easy to get an invitation if you can demonstrate that you're actually working on the core technology. We needed to keep the signal-to-noise ratio down, because if you look on the ZFS mailing list at Oracle, right, the signal-to-noise ratio, well, it surges, but it can be a real challenge, right? And we want the core ZFS developers, wherever they're located, to be able to just stay focused on core ZFS without answering the, how do I clone a data set, or all the random newbie questions that come up, or sometimes the ideological debates that come up about, oh, BTRFS is greater because we don't need to get into those debates when we're. So we try to keep this focus. So we have this working group. As a result, I mean, we still have these challenges, but I think we've been pretty successful. And the result is now there's a lot of really cool innovation coming on in ZFS. There's Matt Ahrens gave a talk about this recently. Defer, delete, the ZFS feature flags, and there's a few others that I know about that are coming down the pike. Some enhancements around dedupe and so forth. So the upside is we got great advancements happening, and they're happening not just at one company. They're happening actually at multiple companies scattered around. Exenta has done some work there. Of course, Delphix is doing a lot of work. I think Joyent's done some work, like the ZFS quality service work was done at Joyent. There's actually some work that I know about happening at a few other companies who have representation on the working group. And the nice thing is all these people get into a room and they talk to each other fairly infrequently, but not too infrequently, and we get a lot of collaboration that happens. And some of that collaboration happened, for example, at the hackathon, but some of it happened elsewhere. Other cool things that are happening through the community. KVM on illumos, there's a talk about this. Is it Robert giving that talk? Yeah, Robert? Which is pretty cool. So KVM was ported to illumos as a hypervisor, and Robert is giving that talk. I encourage you to do that. I already talked in depth about the ZFS enhancements. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in dtrace space. Joyent's leading a lot of that work as well. But I think that there's some other work that you're going to see come out from some other sources. There's some protocol enhancements that have been made recently. So, for example, the thin provisioning support in iSCSI that was done at Exenta a while back. There's PNFS stuff that's happening at Exenta. That, I don't know if those code. Are those repositories posted publicly yet? Yeah, I think so too. And you've got all the lock manager stuff is, I think at this point, public review. I mean, this stuff is out there for review, so not all of it is in it. The deal is not all this stuff is integrated yet, but what happens is we have open and public review, and it takes a while as people they can test it, they can review it. Once everybody seems to be happy with it, it gets integrated. And it's not that everybody has to be happy with it, but key people have to be happy with it, and there has to be no real serious objections. So it's
there's also a bunch of SIF stuff in progress, right? Out for review.
That's right. Yeah, you've got a bunch of stuff around SIFs, right? So the multi-tenancy stuff for SIFs, I think, is out there, for example, right? So. One of the other challenges with an open source project, open source operating system project, is differing goals. So, I use the stay on target here, right? So, the key thing here is you got a lot of different people who have different goals. So, there was, for example, a port of illumos to the S390, which is great on one hand, but on the other hand, how do you commercialize this? How many people are going to use it, and what is the actual broad appeal behind it? A key component to having a successful operating system project is having core shared values. I would say that the core shared values for illumos tend to be around quality, a certain level of innovation, and I would say that there tends to be more interest in server-based technologies, although there's some work there's a fair amount of work that's happened around desktop stuff, but the focus tends to be more server-side.